All right. After
Yay.
a couple pivots there, maybe more than a couple. We are connected. So Sari Gonzalez and Becka Koritz, I'm so excited to talk to you ladies. And you are the duet from Radical Learning, and then you also work at the Explore at ALC. So excited to talk to you ladies. And yeah, I guess I want to start off. I want to hear a little bit about yourselves. How did you two meet? What brought you into Mexico? Let's just start there.
Yeah, it's fun. There's so
Yeah,
much to talk about. How much time do we have? We have a half an hour.
half
It's
an
good to
hour.
know.
Yeah.
Do you want to start?
I mean, I think that it's a good start when we met, because that's
Yeah.
when it kind of really started, even if it had started like separately before.
Yeah, so I was directing an agile learning center in Brooklyn, New York, and Becca was directing a center here in Puerto Escondido, Mexico, and I was on vacation with my family,
And she started to stalk me.
I was stalking Becca for like a good few months.
Yeah, and I was
before.
burned out, so I was like, oh no, not another one, I can't take this. And she was trying to pull the Swedish card with me, saying that she had a Swedish mom, and I was like, I don't care, I'm tired, I need to rest.
Yeah, so she was like, I have an hour to meet you for juice, and the hour turned into like hours, and we were just talking about the challenges of
Yeah,
running a center. And
I wanted to meet my community, and I was like, what community?
yeah, the Explorer then was going through a lot of transition, and
This was just before the pandemic hit.
yeah, right before the pandemic hit. And so I went back to New York and was really involved with my community there, with our community, co-created community. And then the pandemic hit and we had to close all of our doors. And it was kind of like, do I want to camp out in New York during the pandemic? Or since we're going online and digital anyway, like, can I do that somewhere else so that my son also has like space to roam around and like be free? And so we came back, and I remember I was in the airport and I was like, Becca, I'm coming back. She's like, oh my gosh. And so it was like a good year of me directing that, maybe not so much a year, but directing the New York Center online and supporting that community. And in that process, we just clicked.
Yeah, we clicked, and
Yeah.
we redesigned the whole process, and I could finally hand over the direction to someone younger and more energetic than myself.
Well, it was a kindergarten when Becca was directing it, and my jam is like somewhat older learners, and so we kind of recreated what that looked like based on the model of our organization in New York, as well as what Becca had already founded. And it was beautiful. It was great. And then has taken on many different forms. And now it's like an immersion program. So I'm kind of back and forth from Mexico to the States. Also, we do a lot of work in the States. So it's taken on another form.
Awesome. Yeah. I want to hear, you just said it's an immersion.
Did we answer the question?
Oh, sorry. I want to hear, you said it was an immersion program. What does that mean?
It means that we ditched the whole year program schedule kind of container, and we deschooled our learning center. So there was a time where neither one of our kids wanted to go to the center because they were just like really involved with their own unschooling lives and projects, and not really wanting to be in such a container. And so it really, I don't know, it kind of like caused us to think about unschooling and what that means for our families, and if we were actually walking the walk in terms of stepping away from conventional models, because at that point the ALC was like a full year program, and it still was very schoolish in many ways.
Yeah, and I think that if I may jump in, I think that something that is very common when you are running a center or an alternative educational project is that you get so entangled in it that you take on responsibility for other kids' learning processes. And so it can be really hard to to see that and to dare stepping out of it. But there was a point where we were like, who are we doing this for? And why are we doing this? Because in the process, which is draining, anyone who's running a center or a micro school will know that. There comes a time where it's like, it's exhausting, and we have to ask ourselves that question. And I think that it was very brave of us actually to do that.
Yeah, and it came really from our own deschooling process. We started deschooling time. Like, what does time mean? What does productivity mean? What does community mean? And like what Becka was saying, you know, unschooling is such a process that it involves and it requires whole families to come together and do this work, with themselves, with their young people, with their, you know, with their communities. And so there was definitely a point where we were eager to like support families more, and our work kind of evolved, and that's where we got into more of like coaching, and at the same time our kids were wanting to explore other things, and we wanted to have more time to like do excursions with them and just be unschoolers ourselves, because that's what felt a little off, was like I mean we were working like 14-hour days and doing all the things, and it's like, is this what unschooling is? Like, so could we really have an unschooling community look the ways that we want it to look, that kind of meet our needs? And at the same time, people were coming in and out of Puerto Escondido, and so having a community, a full year community, just didn't make sense. And people were asking like, can I come for a month? And I was like, yeah, that works, because I'll be in Mexico during that month, and actually this month I want to be in the States, and like this, you know what I mean? So it's like it kind of fits our lifestyle more, our unschooling lifestyle. So what it looks like is seasonal, depending on the flow. We have a 1-week training for parents, where it's like a deep dive deschooling intensive. And then we open up for 4 to 5 weeks, depending on the time of the year, for young people to come together and be in community. And we also support parents during that time to do deschooling work. And then 1 week of that time, parents are in the space, and the other weeks, it's just, you know, young people and facilitators. So that's kind of what it looks like now.
That's awesome. It's really cool to learn about your model and how it has shifted and been dynamic. And I hear you talking a lot about like deschooling and how you're pivoting and figuring out things out for yourself. And I want to know, for you ladies, what does deschooling mean to you? How does one deschool, right? How do you help parents with deschooling? And then when does deschooling end? That's a lot of questions, but feel free to take your time and explore those.
I love that last question.
Yeah, I think the last question has the most simple answer.
It informs the others.
Yeah, it never ends.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending process. But yeah, what is deschooling for us?
I think it's life. I think deschooling actually is a reclaiming of yourself and of your life. I think we've given ourselves and our lives up to societal expectations and kind of ideas of what we should be, who we should be, how we should be. And I'm speaking generally speaking, and from my own experience too. You know, like we followed this kind of like norm of what our lives should look like. And that includes like going to school and doing the curriculum and, you know, high school, university, get a job, 401k, house, mortgage, you know, and just like keeps going until you're dead. And then you look back on your life, and every single person that I've had the chance to speak to that is on their deathbed says, I wish I had done many things differently, including spending time on the things that I love and spending time with people I love. And so I think deschooling is like a reclaiming of all of those things, like our time, our energy, our creativity, and it means stepping outside of the conventional system and living our lives outside of schoolish ways of operating.
Yeah, and I would add to that for me, deschooling is an empowerment process where we have been so disempowered in our lives. It can be through parents who did their best, but still disempowered us, the school system, many times society or a boss. And that for me, it's about empowerment and starting to do more and more things that do empower us. And for me, true empowerment also entails empowering others. So it can be empowering our kids, but it can also be empowering our friends or empowering marginalized groups or wherever you want to take it. But for me, it's really about empowerment.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because it is layered, it is deep. And for me, the reclaiming is also reclaiming of power and acknowledging our power and privilege and acknowledging when we've had power over others and systems of oppression and how we've internalized those. So it actually has nothing to do with going to school or not going to school, but de-schooling, it's like the schooling mentality of like somebody having power over you, you know, somebody on top deciding for you. And we've internalized those ways of being in our relationships, in the world, with the young people in our care. And so it's like a breaking down of those power systems so that we can like actually just be like human to human and relate to each other just from like a humanistic standpoint.
Yeah, and understand that the disempowerment is like clipping our wings. And so our wings need to regrow so that we can actually fly and make sure that we don't clip other people's wings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think in there was something like, how do you de-school? Did I don't
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's such a layered process because it entails all these things and more. Like every person that we interact with we have, you know, the wonderful opportunity to be in community with, like brings something to that process that is theirs, and brings something based on their experience, and their healing too, because it's also a healing journey. And so deschooling to me looks like talking, communicating, understanding ourselves more deeply, understanding our feelings, our needs, what drives us, reconnecting with our creativity, reconnecting with our ancestry, reconnecting with ceremony and celebration and play and learning and authenticity. And so for us, we the work that we do is based a lot in play. It's based a lot in dialogue. It's based a lot in like a decolonized lens of nonviolent communication as well, in terms of just like figuring, kind of like peeling back the layers to figure out like, who are we as humans and how can we relate to ourselves first and relate to others.
That's awesome. I love hearing you ladies speak, because especially having you both together and bouncing ideas back off of each other and adding little bits to what the other one had said. It's so cool listening to you ladies talk. I'm getting a little bit of an idea of what it sounds like almost to be under your guidance. So I kind of want to talk about like the group sessions that you have, because I know this is something that you specifically have. What are the dynamics of your group sessions? How are they different from like one-on-one sessions? And how does that serve the individuals within the group?
Oh, I love those questions. I think that we're always in movement. So there's always evolution. So what is today might not be tomorrow. But I think that we have found a model of how to make a group feel safe in different ways. I mean, as safe as we can get when we don't know each other, but that is the purpose, like to make them feel safe, because we're all in this together. And personally, I prefer working with groups because I feel that groups are benefiting so much from one another. So maybe you will bring up a topic that I hadn't thought of, but still that all that comes up is still very important to me or relatable. I can really see myself in what you're saying. And so I think that it's really interesting because someone brings up something that someone else hasn't thought of, but it still connects for them. So we usually have some kind of startup activity last time, what did we do? We had like a little game, a little warming up, just to warm up the brains around school wounds. And we do have, like, we always have a little bit of content that is based upon the needs of the people in the group, what we perceive, but also on our experience, because most adults go through the same questions and the same insecurities. And then we have breakout rooms, and we come together, we have a hot seat, and where one person is being coached on a one-on-one session, or one-on-two, maybe it should be.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like really trying to have a dynamic time for the group where they can grow together and also create a small community together during that time, so that they feel the support of others. And right now we also have accountability partners, and the group we're working with right now is from like a lot of different countries in Latin America. So, you know, you can have a Mexican talking to someone from Colombia, and they're accountability partners and finding so much in common, even though they live in two different countries. And so that becomes very supportive for them as well.
And so that is the online in-person.
Yeah.
We also do in-person group. Online group. We do in-person group, which is a lot more dynamic, I would say.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of play. We also use a format that comes from the agile learning world, or agile worlds, where people can share offerings, and people can actually, like, we can co-create the space and the time together. So it's not just like us giving this information. It's like, who is there? And that this actually speaks to the online group as well. Like, who is there? What are we struggling with? Or what are our curiosities? What do we want to unpack together? What's coming up? You know, so it's like we can have a side, kind of like a loose structure or a plan, but every day is different. You know, we have an in-person training called a shift. Like, every shift has been different, depending on like who's there and what they contribute. And every group online group coaching has been different too
as well. And I think, of course, it's like, it's very different having 2 hours every 2 weeks during 3 months than being together for 7 days, like full days. That something happens when we spend that much time together. So those trainings are, they're amazing.
somebody said they're revolutionary.
Yes.
Recently, I was like, oh, right.
Yeah. Yes,
that's
we
like
know.
the biggest compliment ever.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit about different languages, and I'm wondering, how does fluency in English and Spanish influence your audience and your offerings?
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, when we give the shift, the training in general, we have always given it in a bilingual way, except for the last time, because everyone was speaking English.
Even though we offered it bilingually, but everybody wanted, could and wanted to speak English. Which was interesting.
So that has been an interesting experience. It's of course like completely draining, like a week of like doing the simultaneous interpreting stuff, and but
being Google Translate.
Yes, being Google Translate for a week, but also for me culturally, I really enjoy it. I think that maybe it's a little bit limiting lately also, but well, because most of the stuff that we put on social media is just in English. So we're not really reaching the Spanish speaking audience that much. We have some followers that have followed me in the past when I used to produce a lot of content in Spanish, and to them to find their way to radical learning is amazing.
And people that have been part of the community, on the ground community in Mexico as well. But I would say, I mean, the fluency piece, it's interesting, because I think we would love to reach more folks in Spanish, but we only have capacity to do so much. So right now we actually the group coaching is in Spanish, and it's awesome. Because anytime we can get a group together that's interested in getting together in Spanish, it's like, yeah, let's make this happen. So I think it's great because there's potential for expanded reach. And yeah, hopefully we'll just have more people to support making it happen.
Yeah, and someone said something, I can't remember when this was, but like, like as if we shouldn't be doing it in Spanish because we're not native Spanish speakers. And when I heard that, I got so confused, because then I shouldn't be doing it in English either, because I'm not an English native speaker, and I speak better Spanish than English, I think. So,
and actually Spanish is one of my mother tongues. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, but I mean, there's definitely questions around like, appropriateness too, you know, like, is it not so much appropriate, but like, should we be the ones offering these things
Yeah.
as well?
And I mean, that
we
can
want to
be-
be mindful of
yeah.
that.
Yeah. And at the same time, for me, it's hard because I speak better Spanish than English. So it's like, oh, then I can't do it in
Imagine.
Spanish, and then I can't do, shouldn't I? Maybe I shouldn't be doing it in English either. It's like, for me, being a multilingual person, I speak 4 languages fluently. I don't look at languages as something that you own. It is something to be used, and I use them with joy. And so, like, for me, the more I can use them, the better. And I think it's fantastic because we reach more people. But we can't have, for instance, our podcast also in Spanish. There's like no way. And so it's a little bit limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I've always thought about this radical learning as your title. And I love the title, but I want to think, what does radical mean to you in radical learning? And like thinking of new parents and people that we want to invite into the space, how does that radicalism show up?
Yeah. Can I do the first part and then I
Sure.
toss it over to
Yeah,
you?
go for it.
So as a linguistically interested person, I like radical because it comes from Latin. It means root. The word Latin in Latin is radix. And so it means root. And so it's like a learning that takes us back to the roots, not necessarily radical in the sense that, oh, it's so far out there, even though I think it also is.
Is that where I come in?
Yes, this is where you come in.
She always gives me that part.
You do it so well.
And at the same time, it's radical in the sense that it requires us to take risks and to do new things in order to experience new, right? In order for us to step away from old systems, it takes courage, and that level of like, oh wow, I don't know what's going to happen right now, but something in me, my intuition is telling me that I need to make a change, or I need to do something, or this thing isn't working, so I'm going to go for it. And that moment, that spark is radical. It's radical when we're stepping away from something that feels safe and we're stepping into like a zone of discomfort or unknown. It's radical and hopefully this won't be radical one day, but unfortunately it still is radical right now to not follow the conventional norm. And so on one hand, it's like, let's go back to who we are as human beings and how we learn, how we all learn best, which is just by living and sharing and experience and community together. And also, how can we step away from what's not working in a really courageous way that can be seen as radical to many.
That was good. I like you bouncing off of each other again. It's funny how one's the radical one and
yeah,
one's the rooted one. I'm wondering, because I feel like you ladies talk to a lot of people and you talk deeply to a lot of people. And I'm wondering what comes up a lot in terms of obstacles and challenges. What do you hear from parents the most, and how do you support them?
Yeah. I love your questions.
Yeah,
Dan.
they're good. They're
great
good
questions. I think fear of the unknown, fear of, I don't want to fuck up my kid. Oh, boop, you got to bleep that part out. Boop. maybe not.
I think we're all right.
Yeah, fear of like messing up, and we all have, if we're doing this, I would assume we all have our kids' best interest and care at heart. And so it's like, wow, how do we step away in a way that is like honoring that desire to want to do something different while ensuring that we're not fucking up our kids. And so we really support people to look at those fears, understand where they come from, understand like the power dynamics at play, how we've internalized a lot of things, give ourselves permission to live the lives that we want to live. And that's like multi-layered. I'm gonna stop there.
Yeah, and I would add that I often find that there is a misalignment within parents. Like on one hand, they want all this cool stuff for their kids. They want their kids to be autonomous, independent, critical thinkers, initiative taking, creative, blah, blah, blah. But like the road there doesn't go through obedience and control. And that is what most of us grew up with in different levels, you know. And so this is the autopilot. This is where parents tend to go. And if they don't look into those fears that you talk about, Sari, they're going to try to control their kids because of fear. And they're going to be in radical misalignment between what they say that they want and what they're actually doing. So a big part of our work is helping them see that and be okay with being in fear, being okay with sitting with discomfort and moving through that with some kind of grace.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not easy. That's like one of the biggest, like, it's so easy to know that you're doing something wrong, but then to be comfortable to jump back into what you were doing before. It's like easy to do that. And you're like, wait, hold on, just live with it. Live in the discomfort for a little bit. For sure. All right, I think I have maybe one more question for you. I want to know, what is adult supremacy, and in what ways does it affect our daily lives?
That is like the $1 million question.
It's a juicy question.
Juicy question. Adult supremacy.
Mhm.
So all of the because I know better, because I say so, this is how it is, you ought to, all of the things that we adults have said, do say to kids, the ways in which we think about kids and treat kids based on an underlying notion that they are less than us is adult supremacy. And this shows up in so many ways. Primarily, and we could sit here and talk about like all the ways, but I would say primarily it has a lot to do with consent. It has a lot to do with seeing the dignity in a young person and understanding that they have the same rights to everything that you have. And
which means also like decision making, you know, voicing whatever needs they have, their plans, their desires, they are worth as much as ours.
yeah. So that's the short of it.
Which poses a problem, obviously, for adults.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other part is power, like who's holding the power and why. And I think we see it all over the place. I mean, like just the other day, you know, somebody reached out and like touched my son's hair. And I was like, who gives you the right to do that? Like, would you go and do that to that other adult over there?
Yes, they do.
They do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. So, but this happens with young people a lot, that, you know, adults think that they knowingly or unknowingly have more power.
Yeah, and look at kids as not completely human yet.
Yeah.
Yet.
Yeah.
I deal a lot. One of the things that bothers me the worst is when I'm out with my son and someone asks me a question when my son is right next to me, and it's like a question for my son, and I'm like, he's right here. Or my son comes up and, you know, he's got something important to say, and then that other adult like turns away because they're like, oh, this is not important for me anymore. And I'm like, how belittling is that you can only interact with someone that's on your same level? Yeah, I totally feel all of that. And I love the work that you're doing.
Oh, nuanced.
What's that?
Yeah, thank you. I said it's so nuanced too, you know, like it shows up in these really overt ways, and then it shows up in like these really subtle ways that you wouldn't even think about it. Like even just to ask a person, like ask a young person, like, what do you think about this? You know, this is something I want to do. Like, what are your thoughts? Yeah, adult supremacy sucks. And it's like the basis of, I would say, all of the work we do. Yeah, we're youth liberation advocates. So I would say at the end of the day, who we're doing this for the young people in the world. And somebody actually just gave me a new term, which is like not even young people, like Newmans, which I thought was awesome.
Nice.
Danny Davis doing amazing work in South Africa. Shout out to him. Yeah.
So I want to say, aside from like the weareborntolearn.org/coaching, where else can we find you ladies?
Social media,
Instagram mainly.
we have a love-hate. You'll see us there, and then you'll see us disappear. We're like busy doing the thing, right? Yeah, at radical_learning on Instagram, Radical Learning Talks on Facebook. We have a podcast called Radical Learning Talks where we have a lot of fun. Where else?
I think that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
And here on the Mosaic.
Apparently here now.
Yeah. We
Well,
pop it
ladies,
up all over.
I want to say thank you so much. What was that?
I said we're popping up all over. We're like little mushrooms.
It cracked me up. I didn't expect that. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I know we had definitely some extreme technical difficulties in the front end. So thank you for your time, your extra time. This was an awesome talk. And yeah, we'll see you ladies around.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.